Part 1. When you no longer have the strength to pray, I know you're tired. Not the tiredness of a long workday. Not the sleepiness that can be solved with a rest. This is a deeper weariness. Weary of the soul. Weary of someone who has tried too long without anyone seeing it. You're not lazy. You're not weak. And you certainly don't lack faith. You're tired because you've endured in silence for too long. There are pains you can't express, not because you don't want to, but because you don't know where to begin. You still wake up every morning. You still go to work. You still fulfill your responsibilities. You still smile when you need to smile. Others look at you and think, you're okay, but only you know. Inside, you are running out, like a lamp that is still burning, but the oil is nearly gone. The Bible is not unfamiliar with this state. Faith does not deny exhaustion. On the contrary, the Bible speaks of it very truthfully. King David, who was called the one pleasing to God, a warrior, a leader, a worshiper, at times had no strength left in his soul. He prayed like this: "My soul is weary beyond measure. Save me, O Lord." Psalm 6-3. David did not hide his exhaustion. He did not try to appear strong before God. He did not say, "I'm fine." He did not say, "I can still manage." He said the truth: "I am utterly weary." And the important thing is this: God did not rebuke that prayer. God did not say, "Why are you so weak? Why don't you believe strongly enough?" No. God recorded that prayer in the Bible so that millions of people, over the centuries, when they read it, can breathe a sigh of relief and realize tiredness is not a sin. Exhaustion does not distance you from God. There are days when you no longer have the strength to pray at length. You don't have enough concentration to read the Bible. You don't have enough energy to kneel. You sit there in silence and just sigh. You don't know what to say to God. You don't know what to ask for. You don't know where to begin. And perhaps you blame yourself. My faith is so weak. Others pray better than I do. God must be disappointed in me. But the Bible says the opposite. The Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we should. The Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groans that cannot be expressed. Romans 8:26. When you have no words, the Holy Spirit is still interceding for you. When you only have tears, God understands that language. Even when you only have a sigh, God still hears. You don't need to pray perfectly. You don't need to use eloquent words. You just need to remain before God, even in silence, even in weakness. Because God doesn't abandon you when you're strong, nor does He abandon you when you're exhausted. And if today, the only thing you can say to God is, "Lord, I'm so tired," then that is already a prayer. Part 2. Jesus does, too, call you to strive. He calls you to rest. Jesus never told those who were tired, "Try a little harder, be stronger, overcome it yourself." He knew that people don't collapse from lack of effort, but from trying too hard for too long without rest. What Jesus said was, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. Let's focus on the two words, all. No categorization, no exclusion, no conditions. Not those who pray well, not those who have strong faith, not those who have done everything right, but it is for all who are weary and burdened. God doesn't require you to be completely reformed before coming. He doesn't wait for you to stabilize emotionally. He doesn't wait for you to become strong again. He says, "Come in your current state. Come with your weariness intact. Come with the burden you are carrying." God doesn't give you rest after you're no longer tired. He gives you rest because you are tired. Many of us grow up thinking, "I must try harder. I must be stronger. I must endure a little more." Even in our faith lives, we unknowingly carry that pressure. We think, If I am weak, God will not use me. If I am tired, I have failed. If I need rest, I lack faith. But the Bible says the exact opposite. The Apostle Paul, a man who had endured much suffering, prayed to God to take away his weakness. And God answered him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12-9. God did not say, "I will only work when you are strong." He said, "It is in your weakness that my power is fully revealed." The Lord does not build your life with your own strength. He builds you when you no longer have the strength to build yourself. Rest in the Lord is not giving up. It is not avoiding responsibility. It is not abandoning life. Rest in the Lord is putting down your burdens in their proper place. Jesus continued, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Matthew 11:29. The Lord's yoke is not a crushing burden. It is a shared yoke. You no longer have to pull alone. You no longer have to struggle in solitude. The Lord comes with you, carrying the heaviest burden. And perhaps today, the most spiritual thing you can do is not to try harder, but to stop. Stop to acknowledge, "I'm tired. I can't carry this burden anymore. I need Him." Rest in the Lord is returning to the true source of life. It's allowing your soul to breathe. It's allowing God to do what you cannot do on your own strength. And when you rest in Him, you will realize you are not being left behind. You are being supported. Part 3. Sit down. Don't pretend to be strong before God. Jesus once did something very strange, something that went against natural human reflexes. Amidst a tired, hungry crowd, in a deserted place, when the sun was about to set and there was nothing left to eat, He didn't say, "Go find more food. Try to make do with a little more. Take care of yourselves first." He said something very simple. Tell them to sit down. John 6:10. Before the miracle, before the loaves were multiplied, before the need was filled, they had to sit down. Sitting down. It sounds small, but it's a very profound act of faith. What does sitting down mean? Sitting down is acknowledging, "I'm hungry. I can't feed myself anymore. I need care." Sitting down is giving up running around to save yourself. It's stopping all attempts to prove, "I'm okay. I can still manage." In that crowd, there might be some who still have strength. There might be some who think, "I have to do something. What good is sitting here?" But God doesn't multiply the bread while they are still standing. He doesn't multiply the bread while they are still panicking. He doesn't multiply the bread while they are still trying to fend for themselves. He multiplies the bread when they are willing to sit down. Because when you stand, you are still relying on your own strength. When you sit down, you say to God, "I can't take care of myself anymore." We are very familiar with pretending to be strong in front of others. But sadly, sometimes we do the same even in front of God. We come to Him with standard prayers, words that sound like faith, prepared words of thanksgiving. But inside, we are exhausted. God doesn't need you to play the strong man. He doesn't need you to prove anything. He doesn't need you to hide your weakness. The Lord is near to those who are brokenhearted. He saves those who are broken. Psalm 34-18. God draws near not to those who pretend to be fine, but to those who dare to admit their brokenness. Sitting down before God is saying, "I'm tired. I can't hold on any longer. I don't want to pretend anymore." And it is there that the miracle begins. A miracle isn't always about having plenty of bread. Sometimes, a miracle is peace, coming very gently. It's the feeling of being supported. It's no longer having to fight alone. Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. Psalm 55-22. Perhaps today, what God is inviting you to is not to try a little harder, not to endure another round, but rather to sit down in His presence. Sit down with your truth. Sit down with all that you are carrying. For God doesn't feed you when you pretend to be full. He feeds you when you dare to admit you are hungry. And when you sit down, you will realize you are not abandoned. You are being cared for. Part 4. When God is silent, no immediate answer. There are prayers that don't receive an immediate answer. You have prayed, you have waited, you have hoped, but the heavens remain silent. There is no clear sign, no specific answer. No miracle happens as you hoped. And in that silence, a very painful question arises. Is God listening to me? The Bible does not shy away from this question. Many righteous people have stood in that silence. King David exclaimed, "My God, why have you forsaken me? Why do you stand far away, not helping me, not hearing my cry?" Psalm 22:1. David did not hide his feeling of abandonment. He didn't use flowery words to mask his pain. He spoke directly to God about the silence he was enduring. And importantly, the Bible doesn't erase that lament. God allowed it to be recorded because he knows how painful silence can be. Even Jesus, on the cross, repeated those words. "Father, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27-46. God's silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes, it is a very deep presence. There is another woman in the Bible who experienced God's prolonged silence. The Canaanite woman. She begged Jesus to heal her daughter. He did not answer her a word. Matthew 15:23. Not because God didn't love her. It wasn't because God didn't care, but because he was doing something deeper than what she saw. That silence led her to a very real faith. Not based on emotion, not based on immediate reaction. Waiting in silence is one of the greatest tests of faith, because in that moment, you have nothing to cling to but God himself. Be still before the Lord and wait for him. Psalm 37:7. Waiting is not being forgotten. Waiting is being held in God's right time. God sees the whole picture. You only see a small piece. There are answers that, if they come too soon, will hurt you more than heal you. There are doors that, if opened immediately, will lead you astray. Everything he does is good in its own way. Ecclesiastes 3:11. In the silence of the Lord, he often works in you before working for you. He is molding your heart. He is deepening your faith. He is teaching you to remain even when you don't feel him. Mature faith is not about always getting answers, but about remaining even without answers. And perhaps today, you are in that silence. If so, you are not abandoned. You are being led in a very subtle way. For when the Lord is silent, he is still listening. And when he answers, it will come at the moment you need it most. Not sooner, not later. Part 5. When God's answer is not what you prayed for. There are times when God is not silent. He answers, but that answer is not what you asked for. You asked God to take away your burden. He gave you the strength to carry it. You asked God to change your circumstances. He changed you in those circumstances. You asked God to open a door. He closed it. And you don't understand why. At that moment, the most painful thing is not getting what you asked for, but the feeling, God is not doing it the way I want. The Bible does not hide this experience. The Apostle Paul prayed 3 times for God to remove the thorn in my flesh. He did not ask for anything wrong. He did not ask for anything selfish. He asked to be relieved of his burden so that he could serve the Lord better. But the answer he received was, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12-9. The Lord did not say, "I will take it away." He said, "I will be with you in it." Sometimes, what the Lord gives is not what you ask for, but what you need. The Lord sees what you do not see. He knows the path ahead that you have not yet walked. My thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. Isaiah 55-8. There are doors the Lord closes, not to hurt you, but to protect you. There are no's from the Lord that are a very profound form of love. Even Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, prayed, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." Matthew 26-39. And the answer was, no. But it was from that answer that the salvation of all mankind was accomplished. If Jesus walked the path with an answer different from what he asked, your experience of that too does not mean you are abandoned. It means you are being led through a deeper path. There are prayers that are not answered in the way you expect, but are answered in a way that will shape who you are. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God. Romans 8:28. This doesn't mean that everything is pleasant. It doesn't mean that all pain is good, but it does mean that no pain is meaningless when placed in the hands of the Lord. Perhaps today, you are carrying in your heart an answer that disappoints you. If so, you are allowed to be sad. You are allowed to be confused. You are allowed to cry. But you don't need to leave, because sometimes the greatest thing God gives you is not what you asked for, but Himself. And when you look back, you will realize God's answer was not what you asked for, but it saved you in a way you never imagined. Part 6. When Jesus also became tired and rested. We often think of Jesus as someone who is always strong, always ready, and never tired. But the Bible shows us a very different image, a very close image. Jesus was tired, not tired because of sin, but tired because of loving too much, tired from giving without ceasing, tired from walking among the crowds that were pulling him in every direction. The Bible records a very simple detail. Jesus was weary from his journey and sat down by the well. John 4-6. He sat down. He did not teach. He did not perform miracles. He did not heal anyone at that time. He simply sat. Jesus did not see rest as a sign of weakness. He did not feel the need to prove that he was always strong. He allowed his body to rest. On another occasion, after the disciples returned from their first missionary trip, they told Jesus everything they had done. They were tired. They were excited. They were exhausted. And Jesus said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." Mark 6:31. Jesus did not say, "Do more. Take advantage of the opportunity. Try harder." He said, "Rest." This means rest is not a betrayal of the mission. Rest is part of the mission. Even while on the boat, in the midst of a storm, the Bible records a very strange detail. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping with his head resting on a cushion. Mark 4:38. The disciples panicked. The waves were violent. Death seemed imminent. But Jesus slept, not because he was indifferent, but because he trusted. Jesus' rest was a silent declaration. I am in the Father's hands. If the Son of God also needed rest, then you don't need to be ashamed of being tired. If Jesus also stopped to sit, to sleep, to withdraw from the crowd, then your need to stop is not a failure. It is human nature. We often think that faith is always moving forward, but the Bible shows that faith is also knowing when to stop. He makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. Psalm 23:2. God doesn't just lead you, He also leads you to rest. Perhaps today, you're blaming yourself for being tired. You're pushing yourself harder. You're afraid that if you stop, everything will fall apart. But look at Jesus. He was tired, and he rested. He didn't lose his mission. He didn't lose his power. He didn't lose his love. He only regained his strength. And perhaps today, the most spiritual thing you can do is not to keep running, but to rest in the presence of God. Because resting doesn't mean giving up. Resting is believing that God is still working even when you stop. Part 7. Rest in the darkness of faith. There is a kind of rest that doesn't come from things becoming clear. It doesn't come from problems being solved. It doesn't come from a complete answer. It is rest that happens in the darkness. The darkness of faith is not a loss of faith. It is when you still believe, even though you can no longer see the way. There are periods in your spiritual life when you don't feel God near. You don't hear His voice clearly. You don't see signs of Him acting. You pray, but your prayers fall into silence. You read the Bible, but the words don't touch your heart, and you ask yourself, am I going the wrong way? The Bible calls this walking by faith, not by sight. For we walk by faith and not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5-7. Rest in the darkness of faith is when you stop trying to force yourself to feel. Stop searching for signs to reassure yourself. Stop demanding that God prove something. You just stay. Stay even without understanding. Stay even without seeing. Stay even with an empty heart. This is where many people give up, not because they don't love God, but because they are tired and don't know that mature faith often goes through darkness. Even Abraham, the patriarch, walked without knowing where he was going. He went out without knowing where he was going. Hebrews 11-8. He had no map, no guarantee, only a promise, and he rested in that promise. The Psalm says, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Psalm 23-4. Note this: God doesn't promise to always keep you out of the valley of darkness. He promises to be with you in it. Resting in the darkness of faith is not about feeling at peace. It is about choosing to trust even when peace has not yet arrived. It is about laying your soul down into God's hands without knowing what tomorrow will bring. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Psalm 31-5. Perhaps today you are in that darkness. If so, you are not lost. You are not abandoned. You are in a very deep stage of your journey of faith. There, God doesn't teach you to do more. He teaches you to believe more deeply. And if all you can do today is to whisper, "Lord, I entrust myself," then that is enough. For in the darkness, when you can no longer grasp anything, you are being held by God, and that is the deepest rest that a soul can find. Part 8. Sitting at the feet of Jesus like Mary. There is a very peaceful scene in the Bible. No great miracles, no crowds, no noise, just a small house, a woman, and Jesus. Mary sat at the feet of the Lord and listened to his words. Luke 10:39. Mary did nothing. No serving, no organizing, no trying to prove herself useful. She sat. Meanwhile, Martha was busy, worrying, serving, stressed. Martha did good things, necessary things, things everyone praised. But Jesus said something very gentle and very profound. "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things. Only one thing is necessary." Luke 10:41-42. Mary chose that. What is necessary is not doing more, not trying harder, not fulfilling every responsibility. What is necessary is being with the Lord. Sitting at the feet of the Lord is saying, "I have not come here to do anything for you. I have come here to be with you." In a world that constantly urges you to do, to prove, to run nonstop, Mary chose to stop. Sitting at the feet of the Lord is placing herself in the position of a student, one who doesn't know everything, one who doesn't control everything, one who needs to be taught, to be loved, to be near. Mary was not rebuked by the Lord. She was protected. The best part will not be taken away from her. Luke 10:42. No one can take away the moments you spend sitting at the Lord's feet. No work, no pressure, no failure. Perhaps today, you are like Martha, busy, trying, tired, but the Lord does not condemn you. He only invites you to sit down at his feet. No need for eloquent words, no need for plans, no need for explanations. Just be present, and if you don't know what to say, do as Mary. Listen, because sometimes the most healing thing is not the answer, but the presence. Sitting at the Lord's feet is where you don't have to prove anything. No need to pretend to be strong. No need to pretend to be okay. Just be yourself. And God is there. And like that, you get to rest. Part 9. Rest at the feet of the Lord. There will be a moment you realize that you no longer need to explain anything to God. You don't need to say the right things. You don't need to be strong enough. You don't need to be okay. You just need to be there, sitting at His feet. No proving, no showing, no pretending, just being present. The Lord has never asked you to carry the world alone. He has never demanded that you always be strong. He has never required you to understand everything before you can rest. He only invites you to come. And perhaps tonight, after all the prayers, after all the waiting, after all the silence, the most sacred thing you can do is to put down the burden, put down the questions, put down the exhaustion, and rest. Even if the answers haven't come yet, even if the darkness hasn't lifted, even if tomorrow is still uncertain. Because faith is not always about moving forward. Sometimes, faith is about stopping and believing that God is holding you when you no longer have the strength to hold on. So, sit down, breathe, and be still. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. At the feet of Jesus, this is where weary souls are restored. And here, you finally find safe rest.